Everyone. Laura, thank you so much for joining today's class. It's perfect for the Easter holiday coming up. We're going to make some really cute cupcakes. We can go over to the overhead camera and I'll go over some of the supplies that we're going to be using today. So here's the cupcakes that we're going to be making. I have a bird's nest with little robin eggs. I have a sheep and a chick. And for these, we're going to be using the Satin Ice ready-to-use buttercream, which is absolutely amazing. I will go over more when we start to use this. We are going to be using several different colors of fondant. I have white, yellow, turquoise, peach, and dark brown, which is the chocolate flavor, and the rest are vanilla flavor. And then I also have the new edible markers. Satin Ice has several different packs of these available at Michael's. Today we're using the neon set because we will be using orange and black. The other sets are primary, and there's bold, fine, extra fine. Today's are neon and they are the fine tip. And then I also have the new Satin Ice edible glue. This is going to help us adhere our different fondant pieces together. I'm also working on a silicone mat. I like to work on this because it's a nice non-stick surface and it just helps keep my area nice and clean, especially when working with fondant. I also have a spatula here. This is great for scraping the buttercream out of the container and giving it a really nice stir. I have a rolling pin for rolling out our fondant. I have two different cutters here. They're about 2.5 inches wide. I have a circle cutter, and then I also have a flower cutter. I know this is commonly called like a plum flower cutter. If you don't have this, it's okay. You can just stick with the circle, but I thought that this shape gave the sheep more of a cuter look. So I stuck with that. But like I said, if you don't have this flower cutter, you can definitely use a circle cutter. I also have a paintbrush. This is going to help us adhere the edible glue to the fondant when needed. I also have, if you don't have any special fondant tools to do like special different textures like we're going to do on this sheep, you can always use a toothpick. So I have that here because it's just a pointy edge. You could even use a fork because that has a pointy edge. I always like to give you guys ideas for different things that you might have at home to use for tools, and if you don't have them at home. But if you did have a fondant tool, it's one of the pointier tools to get that texture. Let's see. I also have a piping bag here. And this is for the buttercream for when we decorate our cupcakes. Over here, this is not necessary, but I do like to have either a tray and parchment paper or a cutting board or some sort where I can place my fondant pieces on. This way, right after I cut them and I want them to dry, I can place them here and I'm not lifting them up and maneuvering them too much and causing the pieces to crack or anything like that. I also have, since I don't have direct access to water and soap right now, in case my hands get dirty in between moving with different colors, I have wet paper towels and dry paper towels. You'll always want to make sure your hands are nice and clean in between different colors. I have cornstarch. So the cornstarch is used interchangeably as well with powdered sugar if you have that instead to help keep the fondant from sticking to the surface in your hands. But we'll go over that too. You don't want to use too much of that. And then I also have a pair of scissors to help us cut the fondant packs open and our piping bag when we need that. And then another important thing is I have plastic bags here, and this is going to help us store the fondant once we open these because these aren't resealable and they're not in the tub, so you can't keep them covered. So after you open these, it's very important to keep them enclosed in a container and then put them in an airtight container as well. This way your fondant doesn't dry out. So as we begin, I will definitely give you guys some tips with fondant and explain more about how it can dry out and how to avoid that. So I'm just going to place these cupcakes over here to the side. And I do want to start with the chick because I just want to roll this. We are doing edible marker on this, and I want this to set up a little bit before we do the edible marker so that it doesn't dig into the fondant at all. So I do want to start with the yellow, and we'll cut out that circle and we'll put it to the side. I also forgot I do have cupcakes here. And for a nice little hack, if you don't feel like baking cupcakes, you guys can always try to go to your local food store in the bakery section and ask them for unfrosted cupcakes. So no, I don't know if every grocery store does it, but our local one does. So that's always very convenient if you don't feel like baking and you just want to decorate. Okay, so to begin, I'm just going to open up the yellow fondant. You guys can let me know if you're new to working with fondant, if this is your first time, or if you've worked with it a little bit before. I know it might seem scary to some people who haven't used it before, but I promise it's so much fun to work with, and it's not scary at all. So I'm just going to take a small portion of the yellow out. Nothing too big, because I'm only showing you guys how to do like one of each of these designs. First time for you. And if I don't see your questions, don't worry, Felicia will let me know as any questions come through. So now that I have this open, I'm just going to kind of fold this over, and I'm going to put it in a Ziploc baggie. I would like to keep this in a airtight container as well, because as fondant sets out, it begins to set and it forms, but fondant doesn't set super hard. It sets more like, I like to describe it as a sprinkle. So when you bite into it, it's not hard as a rock. It has like a nice little crunch, but soft on the inside. But as fondant sits out, it begins to set. Just like if you were working with buttercream will start to crust as it sits out. So because it's water-based and has sugar, it begins to set as it's exposed to air. So always keep your fondant covered in a bag and into an airtight container. If you have the Satin Ice pails, you can just keep them right in the pail. That's why that container is very good. So right now I'm just kneading the fondant. And if I'm working with more fondant, I would knead it with the palm of my hand on my surface and press down, fold over, press down. And I just want to keep doing this until the fondant gets nice and pliable and gets a little bit of a stretch to it. Because as you do this, you're warming up the gums in the fondant. So as you take the fondant out of the package, you might feel like it's a little bit firm, but not so firm that you can't maneuver it or manipulate it or anything. But as you knead it, that's when you'll really start to be able to work with the fondant. So I'm just warming it up a little bit. And then I'm going to roll it out. So first, before I roll out a piece of fondant, I like to just form a ball, and then I'm just going to press it down a little bit on my surface. If you're someone who has warmer hands, I tend to have warmer hands. So that might cause the fondant to stick to you a little bit more. You can always use your cornstarch or powdered sugar, but you don't want to use too much of this, because if you put too much of this into the fondant, it can cause it to dry out, and we don't want that. So really you just do a little bit of a shake, and then you can use your hands to just spread it on the surface a little bit and get some on your hands to coat when you're kneading the fondant, and that should do the trick. So I'm just going to roll this out a little bit. I don't want it too thin, because what I call these are fondant discs that we're making, which are fondant toppers that you make and then you let them sit out in exposed air to let them be hard so that you can easily just pick them up and place them on your cupcake. So I don't like them to be too thin for that. You want them like to have a little bit of a substance, but this is about the thickness that I'm going to roll out the fondant. And then I'm going to just take my circle cutter and I'm going to press down. I like to give it a little twist just to make sure that I have clean edges, especially if your cookie cutter isn't like new and doesn't have sharp edges. Giving it the twist will help give clean edges to your cut. And what I mean by clean edges are along the edge, like you might see, I don't know if you can see it on this camera right now, but they might fray a little bit. But if that happens, you could just take your finger and press them down a little bit. So this is when my little board with the parchment paper comes in, because like I was saying before, also I'm placing my extra fondant in this bag and I'm going to tie it up really tight to make sure there's no air. But this goes back to my board with the parchment paper. When I'm creating fondant toppers that I want to dry, I like to put them on parchment paper on a board so that I can do the rest of the decorating directly on here and I'm not picking this up and manipulating it while it's drying. Because if I start to pick this up and bend it if by accident, then it will start to crack because it's starting to dry. So that could be why some people might experience cracking with fondant, is that they're manipulating it after it's already started its setting process. So right now, yes.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Since there was not any bags listed in the supplies, is there another way they can store the fondant if they don't have any baggies?
Yes. So if you happen to have plastic wrap, you could always wrap the fondant in plastic wrap and then put it in a airtight container. So like a Tupperware. That would be your best bet. So, I mean, it's better to, even if you don't have a bag, it's better to put it in a airtight container anyway, with the bag or with plastic wrap. You just want to make sure that it's not exposed to air. Similar to how Play-Doh works. If you leave Play-Doh out exposed to air, that's why it's always put back into its container, because then it will dry out. So I'm leaving this yellow disc out to the side, and I'm going to let this start to set, because then we'll be able to do the eyes and the beak and the feet with the marker, and then we'll do the rest of the details like the wings later as well. And then while that dries, we can start on the sheep. This one's a lot of fun because it might look a little complicated, but it's not at all. And I'm excited to show you how easy it is to make. So we're going to start with the white. And just going to open this up. And we're just going to take about the same portion as we did for the yellow for now. I'll take my extra, put it in the bag. So just like we did with the yellow, we're going to knead this as well to get it nice and soft. So since I'm not using a huge piece, I just do it in my hands. I'm not pressing it up against the silicone mat. But I can notice that my hands are getting a little warmer, so I am just going to dust a little bit of cornstarch on my surface. Put some to the side if it's too much, and just like dust my hands with it a little bit. And my fondant is kneaded now. So now I'm just going to roll it into a ball. I like to pat it down just a little bit to get any air bubbles out from kneading. And then I'm going to roll it out about the same thickness as the yellow. If you're noticing that your rolling pin is sticking to your fondant as you're rolling it out, you can also dust some cornstarch on top of the surface of the fondant as well. Okay, so that piece is rolled out. I am going to use this flower cutter, but like I said, if you don't have this, you can definitely use the circle cutter and do the same exact things that we're going to do. So like before, I'm just going to press down, give it a nice little shake. Make sure I get a nice clean cut. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to take out the peach, because before we create all of this texture, I want to make sure that the head is, the face is there so that we can go around it and kind of put some of the white fur around the face. So that's going to be the next step. And between then, I will put the rest of my white fondant into this bag and we'll go back to it in about a minute. So next, we're going to open up the peach. And what I love about satinized fondant is that it's all pre-colored into these amazing colors that you don't have to waste time by adding your own food color gel and guessing on what shade it's going to be. Because of that too, you can also mix the colors together to create different shades. So you can go to satinize.com and look at our color mix guide, which is a lot of fun. Okay. So for the little face, you don't need a lot of fondant. I probably took out too much, but I'm just going to knead this a little bit to get it soft. I think someone just asked if they could see the cupcake close up. So here it is. Okay, so for this little face, we are just going to take a small portion of the peach fondant, and we don't need any smaller cutters or anything for that. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift this up. Like I said earlier, if I start maneuvering this as it starts to dry, I'm going to get cracks into it. So I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to put it right here on my board, and I'm just going to work directly on this. Okay, so when I have to make a small shape and I don't have a small cutter, all I do is I kind of form the shape. Like I'll roll this ball into like an oval, and then I just press down and flatten it, and then I'll get this oval shape without having to use a cutter. So that's what I'm going to do. So I have this here into an oval shape about this size. And I'm just going to use my pointer finger, have some cornstarch on it so that it doesn't stick to the fondant. And I'm just going to start gently pressing down and form like a nice oval shape. And this is going to be for the face. And if you guys are using bigger or smaller cutters than me, you just have to maneuver it to be like proportionate. So everyone might have different size cutters. So you just have to work with what size you have. So I'm just going to pick this up now that it's a flat oval shape. And if it gets a little bit maneuvered as I pick it up, you could just manipulate it back. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure that it is a nice proportionate size for this, for the lamb. So I'm placing it a little lower than the center, pretty much in the center though. And I'm just going to make sure it's pressed on and smooth. Since my hands are on the warmer side, I didn't actually have to use edible glue, but if it was dry, you would want to use the edible glue to get this piece onto the white. And what I'm going to do is I'll just have some edible glue here on my surface, squeeze so that I'll have it if I need it. The edible glue is great. It really gives really good adhesion. If you don't have edible glue, you can always use water. Okay, so now that we have the face on, I'm going to start the texture around the sheep. Hold it up closer so you could see the texture. And we're going to do that with more white fondant and the toothpick that we have. So what I did for that, I'm just going to put the rest of this peach fondant away for now. We'll need it again for the ears. So before I take the white fondant out, I'm actually going to take my brush and I'm just going to take some of the edible glue and I'm just going to brush some along all the white of the surface. It's important not to use too much edible glue because then everything will slide around. A little bit of this goes a long way. So I'm just going to do a thin coating of edible glue on top of the white fondant around the peach, because this is where we're going to add more white fondant and create that fuzzy texture. So I'm just doing a little bit, spreading it evenly all the way around the white fondant. Okay. So now I'll take out the rest of my white that I needed earlier. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start taking small pieces and I'm going to roll them into balls, probably the size of a pea. And I'm just going to start placing them on top of the white fondant. And you don't have to be super neat about this because then we're going to use our toothpick to create the texture and kind of spread them around a little bit. Some can be bigger, some can be smaller. And this is going to create that dimension. You're just going to place them all next to each other. Doesn't have to be super neat. I'll pick this up so you can see it closer to as to what I'm doing. So I'm just placing them all along, and then eventually we're going to take our toothpick and then press them down a little bit, spread them out a little bit, and make that fuzzy texture. So it's going to go from this to that texture. So I'm just going to continue just taking small portions of the white fondant. What size fondant are you using? If you're talking about what size pack, I'm using the 4.4 ounces of fondant, but for the pieces that of fondant that I'm breaking off, I would say I'm using about the size of a pea. So here's like a size reference. But like I said, some could be smaller, some could be bigger, and you just have to size it so that it's proportioned to the size of your sheet. Okay, so I have just about enough of these, and now I'm going to use the toothpick and start adding the texture. And anything that I have left over, I'm going to put in the bag so that it doesn't dry out. So this is what it looks like right now. And now I'm going to take my toothpick, pointy end, or like I said, if you don't have a toothpick, if you have a fondant tool that's sharp, you can use that. If you have a fork, you could use the tip of a fork. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start prodding at it and like kind of pressing it down, spreading them out a little bit. And this is going to create that fuzzy texture. I'll pick it up closer so you can see. You're kind of matting down the balls of fondant that you created and giving it a texture. And they definitely make molds out there that you can actually imprint this texture onto fondant. But like I said, a lot of people don't have all of those special tools. So you got to improvise with what you have. Okay, so I'm going to bring this back down because it's easier for me to work that way, but I'm just going to keep blotting these down, creating the fuzzy texture. And then if you realize as you spread these out and give them texture, if you need more in areas, if there's any spaces, you can always add those after. This is a really fun texture to do because it's simple and you don't have to be perfect with it. Okay, so all of mine are textured now. And the next part is going to be the ears. So we're gonna make 2 ears and we're gonna put them around here at the top, each side of the head or each side of the face. And then we'll do that with white and the peach fondant, and we're gonna layer it. And I'll show you how to make the shape of those. So we're gonna do that same concept where if you don't have a small teardrop shape cutter, you could just use your hands to mold a shape and then press down to flatten it to create like a teardrop shape. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna create a teardrop shape for the lamb's ears. These are small, so you're gonna start with 2 really small pieces of fondant. And when you're working with smaller pieces, it might feel like it's sticking to your hands. So again, just you can coat your hands with some cornstarch or powdered sugar to help that from happening. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make kind of like just a small cone shape like that. So what I did was this was a ball, and then I used my pointer finger on one end and I just rolled gently back and forth. That created a cone shape. And once you have that, you can lightly press down and then you'll get that petal like tear shape. Pick this up so you can see. So it'll look like that. And I'm going to do the same thing with the other one. So I'm just going to go back and forth with my pointer finger on one end to create kind of like a cone shape. And then I'm just going to lightly press down to give it more of like a teardrop or petal shape. And then what we're going to do is we're going to attach this to the lamb. I'm going to do it with the pointy side down. And like I said, if it sticks without the glue, that's great. If not, just put like the tiniest dab of glue where you're going to place the ears, or water if you don't have the glue, and then that will help it stick. So I like to not make them like super flat. If they kind of push out a little bit, it's cute. And then we'll add the little inside of the ears with the peach fondant. I have a little bit of white fondant right here, and I'm just going to add like a little bit more texture right in the center or right at the top of the sheep's head, just to give it like a little more character. Take my toothpick, texturize it. Okay. And then next I'm going to take out 2 really small pieces of the peach fondant. So this topper is also going to utilize the edible markers, but again, I'm just going to let this sit and we'll move on to the next. And then at the end, we'll put the faces on. So you need the smallest amount of peach fondant, like even smaller than the piece that you use for the outside of the ear, because you're just going to add this as like a little detail for like the inner ear. So you're going to do like the same idea. Take a small ball of the peach fondant, turn it into a cone shape, put the pointy side down in the center of the ear, and just press down. Oops. So it looks like this. Do the same thing with the other one. First, roll it into a ball. Use your finger on one end of it. Roll back and forth lightly to create a pointy edge, and then flatten it out to create a small petal shape. And then I'm putting the pointy side down in the center of the white ear. And then I'm just going to press down a little bit to adhere it. So this is what it should look like right now. And then we're just going to leave this to the side right now, and we will get back to it after we do the bird's nest topper, and we'll add the face. Okay, so for the next one, we're going to use the dark brown fondant. And the dark brown fondant, sometimes I like to add white to it to lighten it a little bit, but we'll see what we think. I might have added white to this to lighten it a little bit. The chocolate fondant, I mean, the vanilla fondant's delicious too, but if you're a chocolate lover, you'll absolutely love the Satin Ice dark brown fondant because it's chocolate flavor. I mean, I could just eat this as a bar. It's like a brownie. It's delicious. Like right when I open it, it just fills the room with chocolate smell. So I'm just going to take a small portion of this, just like we did with the others. And we're going to knead this until it's soft and pliable. And then I think I am going to add some of the white fondant to lighten this a little bit. So this is like a form of color mixing what we're about to do. So this is what you would do if you wanted to create different unique shades with different colors of fondant. I'm not being very precise with how much of each color I'm using. I have this much brown fondant, and I'm actually going to use probably less than that since I'm going to add white to it to lighten it. So I'm just going to add my extra brown fondant into a bag. And I'm going to take some of my white fondant that's needed from before, and I'm just going to combine these two together, and we're going to get like a nice lighter brown. So this is how you would color mix. You take 2 colors or 3, depending on what the recipe calls for the color mix. And you would knead each of the different colors and then kind of combine them together until it's completely combined. So I'm just.
Sarah, quick question. Just for
Yes.
those who may not know, does the fondant color your hand, or does it bleed?
If your hands are warm and the fondant's sticking to your hands, it may a little bit. Like right now, my hands are on the warmer side, so you might see that the fondant's starting to stick to my hands, but it won't completely dye your hands. It will always wash off. You might notice it more with more of the higher pigmented colors. So if you're using like a black fondant or a bright pink fondant or something like that. And you can always wear gloves when you're working with fondant too, if you want. So I turned this into a slightly lighter brown. This is what we started with out of the package. And then I just added some white fondant and I got to this brown. I do need to put some cornstarch on my hands because my hands are getting sticky. And we're going to start the same way that we did with the others. So we're going to roll this into a ball. And then I'm just going to flatten it out. Just a little bit. Like I said, I like to just do this to get rid of any air bubbles before I roll it out. And I'm just going to roll it out. To about the same thickness as all the others. So this is what my thickness is. And then I'm going to use the circle cutter. Press down, give it a nice twist so you have a clean cut. And then I'm going to pick this up, place it on my board. So I also want to say, if you were doing a bunch of these, you could work where you roll out a larger amount of fondant and cut out all the circles that you need and then place them on a board, and then you can even let them dry and then continue them later. That's where the edible glue comes in handy too, because then you can add your designs later with the edible glue if you're not working all in one time. So now we made the base of our bird's nest. And now we're going to create the texture of like the twigs on the nest. So to do that, we're really just going to create really skinny logs of fondant. And like I said before, there's always tools that you can use to help speed up the process for things like this. There is an extruder tool where you would put the fondant in and you could crank it out to make really thin strands of fondant. But today we're just going to use our hands and we're going to roll it out into skinny strands, and then we're going to wrap it around the fondant. So what I am going to do is I'm going to take the edible glue and I'm just going to brush. I'm going to kind of go along the ring of the outer edge of the brown fondant, kind of creating a ring, because this is where we're going to start layering the strands of the fondant to create that twig look. And we'll add more edible glue as we do the layers. So to speed this process up too, you can start with a larger piece of fondant. And you could start with it in a ball. And then all we're going to do is just roll it into a nice log. We want these to be skinny, so you might even have to use less than this. So I'm just going to take a piece off, turn these into two, and we're just going to create really skinny strands of fondant. So I'm just taking my hands, I'm using my fingertips, and I'm just lightly, gently rolling back and forth. These don't have to be perfect, but we do want them pretty skinny. So I'm just going to keep taking pieces off, and just so that I can make these extra long and skinny. I'll do one so that you could see about how skinny I would want each strand. So you're just going to make a bunch of strands that look like this. And as you make them, you could just start wrapping them around where you place the edible glue. And it doesn't have to be in a circle, a perfect circle. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just start wrapping it around and layering them until it looks like a nest like this. So I'm just gently rolling back and forth. And then placing it on the brown disc. And we're eventually going to have a nice little nest. And as you cover the edible glue and you do your layers, you'll just have to add more on top. So this is what mine looks like so far. I'm not doing it into like a complete perfect circle, because it looks cool like this. And then I'm kind of twisting it and overlapping it, each one, as I go around. So this is something that it doesn't have to be perfect. You can have fun with it. So I'm just rolling out very skinny logs of brown fondant. And then we are just wrapping them around the edge of the disc. And then once our nest forms, then we can create the little robin eggs. Okay, so I have a few strands rolled out now. So now I'm just going to take more edible glue, brush more on here, some on top of the strands that are already on there so I can layer. And what's nice is that the edible glue is clear and it dries clear as well. So like I
Now, how
said,
long does the edible glue, how long does it take for it to dry?
the thinner the layer of it that you put on, the faster it will dry. I mean, if I would say maybe even less than an hour as you're using it. But if you're using a small amount, it's not going to slip and slide and it will stay in place. So it's okay if it's not completely dry yet. So that's why I say it's best to use a very thin amount. So this is what mine looks like so far. Because a little bit does go a very long way. So I think I have enough glue on there right now. I'm going to keep layering my strands of fondant. And like I said, if you had the extruder tool, you could just crank out a ton of really thin strands. But if you don't have that, you could do it this way. And we're just layering and layering until we form a nest. Like you can even build it up a little higher so that the eggs have something to sit in. Like my glue that I put on my surface right here is actually already starting to set, so I might have to squeeze more out. Okay. So you can see I'm just randomly layering these strands, kind of crisscrossing them to just give that, that bird's nest look. And I'm just kind of building them on top so that it does create a little nest where the little eggs can set. So I'm just going to do a couple more. So I'm just rolling back and forth to create really skinny strands. Some can be thicker than others, some can be skinnier. I'm going to layer some more edible glue on top. This way I can stack these up. And then as I wrap them around, I'm just gently pressing down to make sure that it's adhering to the fondant underneath. I'm just going to do like two to three more. So these cupcakes aren't just like, they're good for spring in general. They don't have to only be for Easter, but I thought they would be really cute for an Easter dessert. So this is going to be my last few layers. So I'm just going to brush some more glue. Like I said, if you don't have edible glue, you can always use small amounts of water. And I'm just crisscrossing this and wrapping it around to make like a ring. Okay. So here's what mine looks like right now. And then we will create the 3 little robin's eggs with the turquoise and place them in the center. So I'm just going to give my hands a little clean because I was working with brown. But it comes right off. This is just a wet paper towel. And then in between colors, I also like to make sure that my surface is nice and clean. So if you are using a wet paper towel, definitely make sure you go over it with a dry one. Okay, so then we're going to be taking out our last color, which is the turquoise. And we're only going to need, again, a small amount for this as well. And the robin eggs are very easy to make. So I'm just going to take out about this much. The turquoise color is so pretty and it's perfect for robin's egg. And it's already colored for you. You don't have to do anything. You have to take it out of the package and create. Okay, so I'm just gonna portion these out into and do like 3. I'm not even gonna use all of this fondant. 3 pieces, and then I'm gonna roll them into a ball. And then from there, I'm gonna take my pointer finger and I'm just gonna gently roll back and forth until I get kind of an egg shape. This. So gently, not with too much pressure because you don't want to flatten it. You just want to kind of mold it into an egg shape. It'd be cute to actually use the little Cadbury eggs that they sell too for this. I make some of these a little bigger. Okay, so once you mold these into an egg shape, then you can add a little bit more edible glue to this nest right in the center where these will sit. And then you can kind of just put these in the center like this. And then now we can start using the edible markers. Okay, so first to finish up the nest, we can just take out the black edible marker. This is one of my favorite products, not necessarily the neon in general, but in general, the edible markers, because all you need is white fondant or dried royal icing or cookie icing. And you can take your design to the next level, really do whatever creation you want. As long as you can do a little doodle or a draw, then you could create really fun things. So I'm going to take out the black marker. This set has a lot of fun colors because it has the pink, orange, purple, bright green, as well as the black. So for the little specks, I'm just gonna take and since these are kind of still, they're not set up yet, I'm not gonna press too hard with the marker. I'm just gonna gently just tap along just to make little specks. I'm just taking my marker and I'm just gonna start speckling them a little bit. Just like this. So I'm barely even touching into the fondant, just enough to give the eggs a speckle. Just do it sporadically around each egg. Okay. This is what it will look like. Okay, then next we are going to finish up the sheep by adding the eyes and the mouth. So for that, it's just 2 dots, and then you make a little V shape and then a straight line. So you really, when you're using the edible markers, you don't want to put too much pressure onto the fondant because you don't want to ruin the tip and dig it into the fondant. So you want to be very gentle and just use really light pressure. And it's really pigmented, so you won't even have to use that much pressure anyway. So you just want to just do like a light pressure, make 2 eyes. So here's the 2 eyes. And then I'm just going to make a little V shape. And then a line straight down. So there's our little sheep or lamb. So cute. It's one of my favorites. So next we're going to finish off the chick. And first for that, we can do the eyes since we have the black marker out. So in the center of your yellow circle, you could just make a set of eyes. Just like that. And then next, always make sure your marker caps are on tight too, so that the marker doesn't dry out. Next, we're going to take out the orange and we're going to do the beak. So the beak is just triangle right under the eyes. Looks like an upside down triangle. Again, I'm using very light pressure, especially since we just made these and they're not completely set yet. When I make these fondant toppers, I like to let them sit out for at least 12 hours, like overnight, exposed to air so that they begin to dry. My beak is a little crooked. Okay, and then for the feet, you're just going to make the little feet at the bottom, just like that. It's like 3 lines for each foot. Light pressure. I'll bring it up closer so you could see. So there's the feet. As I'm like looking at the camera and doing this, my chick's a little crooked looking, but it's still cute. Okay, so next for the chick, we will create the little wings and the little hair at the top. So to do that, we will need the smallest amount of yellow fondant. And we're going to use that same technique where we create a teardrop and flatten it to get this wing. So first roll 2 small pieces of fondant into a ball, and then take your pointer finger, go roll over one side of it to create kind of like a cone shape, and then press it down with your finger to create that teardrop shape, which is also working as a little wing. And then you're just going to attach it to this one side of your chick, and then you'll do the same on the other side. So roll it into a ball, then use your pointer finger on one end to create a tapered edge, which will give you a cone shape, and then use your pointer finger to flatten it down. Attach it to the chick. You may need to use your edible glue, you may not. I'll just make sure that mine are adhered good. And then for the little hair at the top, we're just going to start first with 3 really small little balls of the yellow fondant. And then I'm just going to roll each one into like a little strand like this. And then I'm just going to connect the 3 and kind of pinch them on one end like that. and then attach it to the chick. So our 3 toppers are done. And like I said, normally I would like to let these sit out for at least overnight so that they can set up and I can easily pick them up. Like this, I can easily pick up. It's not flipping, like flopping around. It's completely set and it's easy to just pick up and place on your cupcake. Right now, these are way too soft. I could bend them and I don't want them to crack or anything. So I would definitely want to let them sit overnight, but I am going to frost the cupcakes to show you how to place them on. So I'm just going to place these to the side. And we are going to use the ready to use buttercream frosting, which is also another new product that's in Michael's. It's a bright white color and it tastes so delicious. I would love to just sit here and eat it with graham crackers or dip cookies into it. Mine is already open, but it would have a safety seal here that you would take off and open it. And then it's ready to go. If it's too thick for your liking, you can always add a little bit of water to thin it out if you need it to be smoother. But it's really the perfect consistency right out of the pail for piping, which is great. Because a lot of the ready-to-use buttercreams out there, they either don't have a good flavor or they're too thick or they're too thin and they don't hold a pipe. But this is a nice bright white color. It takes colors very well. You can even add, since it's a vanilla flavor, you can even add a custom flavor if you want, like lemon or cocoa powder to create a different flavor. So right now I'm just giving it a simple stir in the pail just to make sure it's nice and smooth. And since these cover the majority of the cupcake, we don't have to do any fancy piping. I'm just going to put it in the piping bag without a piping tip, just to put some on top of the cupcake so that the cupcake topper can adhere to it. So I'm just going to transfer a little bit of the frosting into my bag. Squeeze it all the way down. I'm going to take my scissors. And like I said, we're not using a piping tip. If we were using a piping tip, you would put that in first, all the way at the bottom. But we're just going to cut across to create an opening. And we're just going to do like a flat swirl on each cupcake, and then we're going to place the toppers on. So I'm just going to squeeze, do a nice flat swirl on top. Okay. So now these are ready and we can put the toppers on. Like I said before, I would like to let these set up more. But for the purpose of today's class, I'm going to show you, you just pick them up and just place them on top of the buttercream, and then the cupcakes are good to go. These are one of my favorite designs. I think they're all so cute. Perfect for your Easter dessert table or any spring parties. Does anyone have any questions?
There's a question I'm just going to answer out loud. I see there's a question asking the name of that, but I'm not for sure what exactly they're asking the name of.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining my class today. And in April, I think towards the end, I do have a premium class that you can go sign up for. And it's a premium class, so you do have to pay a small fee, but we'll make buttercream frosting from the buttercream icing mix, and we will frost a spring cake. And I actually have it right here. So this is what we'll make in the premium class, this beautiful spring cake. We'll color the buttercream. We'll go over layering the cakes and how to frost a cake, and make the fondant flowers and how to do piping techniques. So if you want to learn different buttercream techniques and how to create the buttercream from the Satin Ice buttercream icing mix, definitely join me in that class. I think someone wanted to know what the buttercream is called. It's buttercream frosting, bright white, and it's ready to use. And yeah, you can find this at Michael's. You can find all of these Satin products at Michael's.
And Sarah, someone is asking if you were to mass produce 2 dozen, how would you approach that?
Okay, so what I would do is, as you roll out your fondant, you don't have to do one at a time. So if say, for example, you're making the chicks and you have to make 6 of them. So you want to roll out a bigger piece of fondant and then stamp out 6 circles. And then, like I said, I like to place them on my board. So you can put the 6 on your board. You can even let those sit 6, then move on to your brown, roll out your brown, stamp out your brown circles, and then same with your white, and then go back to your chick and then start doing the details, and then go back to your the lamb and start doing the details. And that's, like I said, that's where the edible glue comes in handy, so that if your fondant isn't like still sticky to the touch because it's after it is set, that's where the edible glue really works, so that you can adhere your decorations on top and you don't have to do it all in one step. I hope that helped answer your question. Does anyone have any more questions?
So just for those who asked about the class, I am putting the link for the premium class in the chat as we speak. So please go out and sign up for that premium class. Again, that class is $10. As that the premium classes typically are a smaller class setting, so that you will be able to get more of a one-on-one experience. So we would love to see you there.
Yes, please join me if you can. We'll go into depth on how to stack and layer a cake and frost it with buttercream, to do different techniques with the buttercream, coloring it, and making fondant flowers and decorating a beautiful spring cake. So I hope you guys join me for that. And thank you all for joining me today. And I hope you guys all have a great night. And I will see you next time.